So, what is spiritual awakening? Essentially, it's when we kind of have some kind of spiritual or psychic opening, I guess. So we might start to have psychic experiences or start to understand the world a little bit differently. It's like for us, it's no longer just that like Monday to Friday grind. It's not all about money and work and, trying to save for retirement and those sort of things. It's like we start to look at the world a little bit differently and perceive it a little bit differently too. So we might start to have experiences of spirit, where we might start seeing things, or we might start hearing things, or feeling things that we perhaps didn't before. And spiritual awakening really is quite an individual thing. So not everyone has the exact same. It's not like a cookie cutter thing that this is exactly how it happens. For some people, they have like a really big, profound experience. It's like at some point in their life, suddenly they might have what's called a Kundalini awakening, where they have a real physical um, sensation that occurs, as well as having lots of spiritual shifts where they suddenly start seeing and hearing and feeling things. And it's like all their psychic centers have suddenly opened and exploded. And some people will have, they'll suddenly see a spirit, or they'll suddenly start to have experiences which might be a mixture of seeing and feeling, etc., of spirit. And it's just all of a sudden that they're having all of these things that start happening, start perhaps seeing auras, seeing spirits, seeing movement, or hearing things. Or being really just knowing lots of things and finding that they're telling people things that they wouldn't have otherwise known about. So it can happen really suddenly, like somebody's flicked a switch. But it can also happen really slowly as well, where it's like we'll suddenly be guided to the right thing, and we'll read that, and then we'll want to know a bit more, and we'll start to realize we've been having little things happen that we just weren't really conscious of. It was just kind of more like part of our natural everyday life, but we just didn't realize that, perhaps other people didn't have them, or that they were connected to psychic abilities. And then the more that we explore that, the more it kind of starts to really open up for us. And perhaps the more experiences that we start to happen. And it can really start to be a snowball effect after that. So it might get faster, or it might still just be this nice, slow, and steady experience that you have. And of course, there's those that kind of come in that have psychic experiences very early on. And I think it's those psychic experiences, like for myself, that kind of spur you on, because you kind of can't ignore them. So you start exploring it and looking for answers as to, what does this mean, and how can I cope with this better, trying to understand it more. So I think with whatever kind of spiritual awakening it is, always doing that exploring and trying to understand it better is always like one of those big key things to helping yourself be able to experience more and open up more, but also to be able to get a handle on it and not be so frightened of it. Because as part of spiritual awakening, there tends to be negatives as well as positives. So we can get into that real paranoia and really frightened state. And I see this quite a lot with people that come into Mystical Dragon, and they might be having experiences like a big spiritual awakening, but often their first reaction to it is it's really scary, because you've not had these experiences before. At best, you might have seen some things on the TV in a movie that was probably a scary movie to start with. So that puts the wrong thoughts into our head. But a lot of people automatically, if they're having experiences about spirit, will start to think that they're not positive spirits, and they'll be really frightened and get more frightened and paranoia, and that can snowball as well. So the more that we can understand about what's going on and put our own minds to rest, that in fact it's a positive thing, and even start to learn some techniques to help us to cope with these things, then the better off that we are as these spiritual awakenings occur. And for us at Mystical, we run the psychic development courses, and we always find a lot of students seem to really evolve and grow on such big personal levels as well as spiritual levels, just by starting to have a safe place to share these experiences, start to feel a bit normal about what's been going on, and be able to kind of explore opening them up even further and feeling safe to open them up further. And I think having some of those, negative fears and worries around whatever might have been happening, being able to be put to bed and to be put to rest is always really helpful too. And so I'm also seeing that more and more people are really being triggered to have spiritual awakenings as well. So there are a lot more people that are opening up to the spiritual realm, that are actually having experiences or realizing that, that they have gifts and that this is something worth exploring that we can develop and is helpful to us in our own lives as well. And part of the reason that there's more and more people that are having these experiences is because of what's called this ascension energy that's going on at present on our earth. And so, what is ascension? Well, essentially, ascension is like a big vibrational shift that we're currently experiencing on the earth at the moment. And it's this vibrational shift that is really helping to push all of us to have a higher vibrational energy. And higher vibrational energy means that we will have more psychic experiences. We will have more spiritual experiences because a higher vibration will always help to open us up to that. Lower vibration tends to kind of more wipe us out, make us more exhausted, and all of those sort of things. But higher vibration will help us to connect to our spiritual gifts, and also our spiritual guides, all of those energies that are around us, that are working with us, that we can't necessarily physically see, but are definitely still there. I always say, like our little spiritual posse that we have, that are really trying to help guide us. So a raise in vibration is going to help us to connect to them as well, and to their signs and their messages, their guidance and their healing as well, to really help facilitate that also. So if you've heard about the story of Atlantis, that's how I kind of relate things that are going on at present. Atlantis was a beautiful civilization there for quite a while. There was lots of gifted people, but then it started to get overtaken by the greedy, by the selfish, by those that just were seeking out power and money and all that sort of stuff. And then that ended up being kind of a big disaster. It ended up imploding on itself because it was taken over to such a level by greed and being selfish and seeking out power. And I really feel like we are kind of walking in those footsteps again at the moment here on the earth. There's so much negativity and so much greed and power, and all the wrong things that are going on such a huge level at the moment on our earth. And so we have this ascension energy that's coming in to kind of help us to be able to shift and move and evolve instead of actually walking completely that path again and ending up, being in ruins and perhaps not even being here in the end. I mean, obviously, if we have another world war or something like that, I'm sure there may not be any of us left. So that's what the ascension is put in place for, is to really help to trigger us to be able to have our spiritual awakening, to be able to start to open up on those psychic and spiritual levels, and on those heart levels. Like, I always see that the spiritual work that we do is very connected in on the heart, and that's the energy that our earth really needs at the moment. That's the energy that all of us here need at the moment. We really need that heart energy, that loving energy. And that is what we get connected to as we have these spiritual awakenings and we continue to open up and evolve more and more on those levels. It's about working from the heart, not working from ego and all of those other things that we can see quite obviously around us at the moment. So how is this being triggered? Well, there are some of these energies that I talk about from time to time on Mystical Dragon's main business page, things like solar flares, meteors and comets, even things that are on the earth itself like earthquakes and the Schumann resonance, are all things that are helping to trigger some of this ascension energy and trigger some of this vibrational change, for us to be able to continue to have that awakening and keep evolving on those spiritual levels. And it's really interesting because there are actually scientific things that you can go and explore to see that, yes, actually solar flares do have an influence and an impact on our atmosphere here on the Earth, because things like solar flares and solar storms actually send out a lot of radiation, and that actually does physically have an impact on our ionosphere and our atmosphere here on the Earth. And so that in turn actually has an influence over us physical humans that are living here on the Earth too. And even when there's changes in the Schumann resonance, if you want to do any exploration on that, there's a lot of scientific evidence as well about how the Schumann resonance actually, we are very connected to it here on the Earth. We're connected to that Earth's heartbeat, as they call it. And when there's things that change, we can really have physical sensations and I think emotional and spiritual shifts and changes as that happens as well. So it's like these things are pushing our buttons. And look, things that are in our atmosphere certainly do make an influence over us. Just look at the moon, for instance, and just having a full moon. Any nurse or, policeman or any of those sorts of emergency services can certainly tell you that something that's in our sky is certainly having an influence over us as well. So there's so much on that planetary level that really does influence us here on the physical Earth. So what tends to happen when we have these kind of shifts that take place, we have a solar flare or the Schumann resonance decides to have a big spike, or even has, it's been actually having dropouts for so many hours at different times as well. So any of that sort of stuff can cause what get called ascension symptoms. And it'll depend where you are on your spiritual journey as to what symptoms you might have yourself. Um, and it can really change. So I find depending where I'm at myself, in life, in what's going on around me and where I'm feeling spiritually, can also influence how I kind of receive that energy in that moment. So for instance, sometimes you will have a really positive experience when something like this occurs. And you will find you feel really connected to universe. There's synchronicities in your life. Everything seems to flow. Your psychic gifts might seem to get really much louder, so you might hear more or see more. Find that you're really trusting universe and getting lots of loud messages that you just feel really guided to trust and flow with. And so you might have a really positive experience when something's triggered. Or you might find that you may be going through a bit more of a rough patch where we're trying to integrate this energy and we're really feeling headaches. We might be feeling fatigue. We might feel aches and pains often get really highlighted. So if you're someone that already has maybe some, different niggles, they can get really highlighted, those aches and pains in our body. We can get things like heart palpitations. We can get dizziness. We can get that there's quite a few different physical symptoms that we can get, like cold and flu type symptoms. We can get really hot, or we might find we get really cold for a little while. I tend to go through cold patches where I just can't get warm, and it's often an energy, through ascension times that I might find I just get really freezing cold and it's hard to get warm. Um, so these are all some of the ascension symptoms that tend to happen. And as I said, they can be different, but I find heart and third eye and crown tend to be the chakras that are getting triggered the most at the moment when there are ascension symptoms that are going on, when we have had a solar flare or a solar storm or the Schumann resonance, or recently, and I think currently, we still have a comet that's been going overhead. So you may have been finding that there's some of these being triggered for you at the moment, with that comet energy that's going overhead, which is bringing certain energies for us as well at the present time. So just know that this is part of that ascension. And when this starts to happen, I like to go looking for where something happened when I start to find I'm having certain experiences. And then when I know, yes, something's happened, like a solar flare, then it kind of helps you to understand, okay, I'm not going crazy. I'm not suddenly getting really sick with something. Um, I know that there's certain things and certain tools I can kind of work with and call on to be able to actually help me. Because especially with the negative type of physical experiences and maybe feeling emotionally overwhelmed, or we can get into these really lonely spaces as well. So there's a lot that can happen on an emotional level. Um, you know, this is because that energy is trying to assimilate with us. And so sometimes it just takes a little bit for it to really work in and kind of integrate really fully for us. And so that's why we sometimes don't have a real positive experience with the ascension energy. So then we need to go and start to do some things if we're not having a good time of it to try and help ourselves. So we can do things like grounding, like I talked about last week. So doing grounding and also doing protective work, energetic protection is always really helpful to help when we're having trouble with ascension and feeling like we're kind of being battered around a bit with it. Meditation is always really helpful too. So we can, with our meditation, tune in with our guides, tune in with our body, and just kind of look for advice and seek guidance as to is there other things that I can be doing at the moment that will be helpful. There are crystals that'll help, and I like to go intuitively with what crystals at different times. But I find especially golden tiger's eye is a really great crystal to use through solar flare and solar storm and solar energies when they're being a problem. But sometimes you'll feel called selenite's another one that I use regularly when if I'm struggling with ascension energy as well. Excuse me, and needing something. So just go intuitively if you're finding you're struggling, perhaps do a meditation and just try and check in with yourself as to, what's going to be the most appropriate crystal or crystals to carry that might help. Also, drinking plenty of water is like one of those number one things to do when we're really working on that level. Um, when we've got, even if you're doing well through that ascension time, or while we're trying to assimilate that energy, even if you're doing well, we need to drink plenty of water. And this just helps our body to be able to flush out anything that it doesn't need, because that's part of what it's doing when we're kind of having headaches and tiredness and those sort of things. Our body's trying to flush out what it doesn't need so that it can receive the energy that's being given to us um, during that ascension, during that solar flare, etc. So drinking plenty of water will definitely help and is something to do whenever we know that there's something like the Schumann resonance, etc. Do, of course, explore your gifts as well and use them and kind of, try and work with them a little bit during those times because you can tend to find that they will be kind of more tuned in. But you might find, sometimes I'll find that I'll start getting earaches or hearing extra things like buzzing in your ears and things like that during those times. And I always say that's like them adjusting us. That's part of the adjustment process. Um, so it can be hard to kind of, hear doing the clairaudience while we've got things like that are going on, but perhaps try and lean on some of your other gifts instead. Practice perhaps trying to see auras or do something like that if you get the opportunity to. Also, things like salt baths tend to be really helpful if you're really struggling, then perhaps taking some time to have a salt bath or um, perhaps trying to do a shower as well, just to take some time and allow, do some clearing work for yourself to allow yourself to release anything that doesn't serve you anymore. And sometimes during these ascension times too, we'll have like themes, healing themes, and things that are coming to the surface for us. We might start seeing, themes is a good word for it. Seeing things around us that trigger some of the emotional stuff that perhaps we haven't dealt with ourselves, and that is part of it too, because that's trying to clear stuff out. It's trying to show us we need to work on this, we need to heal this, we need to forgive this, so that we can let it go, and that makes room for the more positive energy to keep coming through, for our vibration to keep shifting. Because if we've got a lot of baggage with us, it's really hard to raise vibrationally. So we will struggle when things are happening. ascension energies happening if we've got a lot of baggage. So doing our best to start to work through some of that, even go see a healer, go see a counselor, and start working through that is always going to be really beneficial to help you with letting go of that sort of stuff, to help you in raising your vibration and embracing those spiritual aspects of you, and just feeling better within yourself, honestly. Um, and of course, I like to bring it back to the heart again. So, just doing any work that's going to be really profound for connecting you back into the heart space, working with some of those heart crystals, starting to trust yourself, looking at your own self love, and putting back into yourself. So, self care is always going to be really positive for yourself when it comes to those sort of things, because the world really needs more love. The world needs more love. Everyone around us, so many people are crying out and they need more love. And so it's up to us, as we're having these spiritual awakenings and we're kind of having these connections, to really bring it back to that energy and to purposely go out there and try and be kind to one another, and try not to share more of that hate energy and that negative energy, but to really try rather to bring compassion, and to bring kindness into the world as well, because I really see that as being connected with our spiritual selves and our spiritual awakening, and the energy that we're trying to bring through when it comes to our ascension as well. So I guess they're the main things that I can think of for myself that are really helpful when it comes to ascension. But certainly when we go through those periods, um, it's a good idea to check in for yourself. So that's where meditation can be really key, to check in for yourself with your own guides and with your own body, to see what is it that I need right now that will be really helpful. And just paying attention to the signs that are around you as well. So if you are seeing, or there's stuff that's triggering me, I'm getting really angry and frustrated, then trying to look at, well, why is that triggering me? What is it that I need to look at here? Like I say, because when we can release the baggage, it'll really help us on a vibrational level and in our own lives as well. So that's kind of spiritual awakening and ascension energy in a little bit of a nutshell, but I really wanted to be able to kind of talk very grounded about it. You will see people that talk about with the ascension energies, that we're moving into 5D, or that we're moving into 7D, or it depends who you're reading or following as to what their version or how they see it is. Um, I would certainly say we're raising in vibration, and the aim is for us to evolve. And what are we evolving into? Well, I firmly believe we are evolving into, like I say, an energy that's more heart centered, but also that we use our spiritual gifts a lot more, so that is actually part of our natural life, rather than it being, rather than us being the weird ones for using our gifts, and for being able to perceive the world differently to the norm, that it would be around the other way, so that actually becomes very normal. And that perhaps we perceive time differently as part of that evolving shift as well. So time and space can be things that are seen very differently. And there are some that suggest that we would even be able to, move through time and space as well, and perhaps do things like astral traveling and be able to move through these things and connect with past lives and all sorts of things. So certainly I'm sure we will have different experience with time than what we have now. I don't think it'll be quite as linear as what we experience currently. But I also, I guess we'll wait and see what's going to happen. I'm more about focusing on the now, and the messages that my guides and energies that work with me is about, focus on the now and actually working with those spiritual energies that are coming through, and working with helping others to understand it as well, and bringing that kindness and heart-centered energy through, because that's what's going to make the biggest difference. And then I just look forward to how we evolve and how our world changes for the better. And I really look forward to that. And hope that you guys do too, but I know I do for sure. So, having said all of that, does anyone have any questions in relation to spiritual awakening or ascension that I might be able to answer? Some water. No? Does that mean I've covered it fairly well for you guys? I know I've talked for about half an hour. Beautiful. Well, I hope that that's given you a better understanding about spiritual awakening if you haven't had it before. Do I know when the ascension will be finished? No. Trust you to ask something like that, Claire. No, they don't give me a timeline when it comes to things like that. It's been interesting because some of the stuff I've been led to read lately has more suggested that it's much more long term, so that it might take 100 years before the ascension actually finishes. I don't know. I don't tend to get a time limit as to how long that's going to take. So whether we get to see it in our lifetime or whether it's going to take a bit longer, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that the messages are coming through a bit slow. Bess, yes, I agree. Do I recommend any books on spiritual awakening? To be honest, there's none that are springing to my mind. I didn't think to kind of brainstorm whether there was any that were good. I've done a lot of my research that myself that I've done to kind of follow up at different times, more on the internet and reading other people's points of view that way, more so through any specific books. But so I would probably recommend more having a research that way and just saying there's lots of opinions and ideas out there about um, spiritual awakening and ascension for sure. But you probably more want to start exploring like the psychic development side of things. Um, there's a few different books that are out there, which we've got recommended on Mystical Dragons psychic development pages on our website. So have a look in there. On the Site One page, we have a spot that has some recommended reading around that. So there'll be some good books there to help you on that level. Oh, great. Thank you for the lovely comments. I'm glad that it's resonating with you. Beautiful. Any last questions before I sign off, guys? Awesome. Oh, thanks, Sandy. Diana Cooper's a really good author. I love a lot of her stuff. I haven't read that one, but I've read a few other of her books, and so I would definitely suggest that her book would be great. So, A New Light on Ascension. That sounds like a great book. Beautiful. All right, thanks so much, everybody. I hope that's all made sense and has maybe given you some ideas about ways to cope with the ascension energy for yourself when we start to have the different solar flares and things happening. And if you've been finding that you're already experiencing some of those energies at the moment with the comet that's going over at present, make sure that you perhaps consider doing some of that meditation, drink plenty of water, perhaps do a salt bath or connect with what crystals might work for you at the moment. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for your beautiful